I'll start again, going back in terms of, this is our dashboard for what we call our KP Life system. It's powered by this Ascend Talent Management System, ATMs. But for us, we're really thinking about how to help people become independent. And so we want them to think about all the things they have to do to improve the quality of their life. So I'd like to introduce you guys to Reggie Foster. He is our demo student. He's a 9th grader, and he is interested in cybersecurity. Deepan, can you scroll down? I want to direct your attention to the left toolbar on his report card. So one of the things that I was mentioning is that one, we view all of our high school students as intern. And after you leave high school or you're past the high school age, we look at you as an apprentice. So and as an intern, we're trying to introduce you to the workforce, get you some practical experience. Here, as I mentioned, and you can see Reggie's KP rate, right? His pay rate is 6.11 points per hour. And you can see that he's accumulated 13,907 points. Let's go to his wallet. Let's look at what Reggie Foster has in his wallet. So one of the things that I want to highlight on the right-hand side under member status is that, again, you see his hourly rate and his total points earned, but also we're using this as a very kind of nuanced way to kind of make this connection between an hourly rate and an annual salary, right? So 6.11 translates into this 15,275 points for your annual salary. And how do the students earn these points? And so let's look at the ways that they can actually earn points. And so we take a very comprehensive view for thinking about the way that students actually earn points. Okay, yeah, I got signed back in. So we think about a comprehensive view for how students earn points. So going to school, we think that that's your number way for building your skills. So we want to make sure that we are rewarding students for going to school or any training, participating in activities that are development that we are sanctioning. That's also a way that they can actually earn points. Volunteering in the community, which we know is a great way to build skills. We have various roles and internship opportunities for students so they can contribute directly with us. And then any awards and certifications. One of the things this does, it also encourages the students to actually communicate with us about their performance, right? So this is part of our data collection process in terms of how we set this up. So let's now see, those are the ways that they can earn, but let's show what they can do. Let's show the transactions page. And so also one of the things that we look at is how students are accumulating this. And what you'll notice is that this looks very much like a banking account. Let's go back to the top of it so you can see the header. So you can see that there's a date and there's a note, and then there's credits and debits and a balance. So we're getting students also comfortable with managing their money. In this case, it's virtual money, but it does work the same way in terms of making debits and credits for their performance. In this case, we're tracking the students' participation in classes and their attendance. This is a project management class, but any class that they're in with us will work the same way. Now that they have these points, what can they do with them? So let's go to my coupon section. So the students are able to basically secure coupons, and with those coupons, they can then purchase. So these are, someone has used 2,500 points to get a $25 coupon. And now we can show you, again, ultimately what the students are interested in and what really motivates them are the things that they can monetize these for. So let's take a quick look at that in our ways to redeem section. So in our ways to redeem, you can see on the left-hand side that we have a store. They can also procure like a tutor or a mentor if they're struggling in a class or they need some assistance. And what we're working on is also a mechanism. Then these are some features that are coming soon where they can loan and borrow, or they can barter and trade their points. for us, this is another way to help them understand the value of money. So if we're having something like a field trip or we're having any kind of incentive, we don't just have the students actually participate. What we do is we have the students actually purchase the field trip, and they have to use their points for that. And that allows them to have a target and know that they have to achieve a certain goal, but it's meant to motivate them to participate. And so this is one of the things we just wanted to quickly show before we jump into the content, that the technology is really trying to engage the students beyond just delivering content, but making sure that we're motivating them to actually engage with the content and to achieve the results that we're looking for. Anyone have any questions about that part of the technology in terms of the incentive system, the pay rates? Okay, and certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to put those into the chat. Okay, great. Now I'm going to jump into the actual course content. So let's go to that section, please, Depian. So typically, we're already in the course, but Depian, can you just hover over My Courses? So this is how a student would actually get engaged. So they would actually come and they would select whatever class that they're in. They would select the pre-employment transition services, and then they would be brought into this screen. Okay, thank you, Depian. From here, you can see that their schedule, so they can look at their schedule. We have some quizzes, we'll cover some of that, and also the reward system, which I've already covered. Scroll down a little bit so they can see. Just at the top, you can see that there is an announcement section here. Brian, just click on the announcement so that we can just show them how that feature works. So this is if we want to communicate with the students, it's attached to their email. So not only would this be in the class, but they would get an email. So if class is canceled or class is delayed, or there's an assignment, or there's a news article that's relevant, this is an easy mechanism for us to communicate with the class as a whole. A fairly standard feature in terms of online learning. And this class can be delivered in multiple ways. So we often use this as a way as how I'm showing you, where I am as an educator walking a student through it. But often if we are distributed, the students are also able to log in and they're seeing the same information, right? Because we're currently logged in as a student, Reggie Foster, versus as the educator, where we have a little bit more functionality to help manage the classroom. Okay, let's go back to, yeah, thank you, Depian. Let me just show you some of the blocks that are some of the content areas that we have as far as it relates to the pre-employment transition services. Scroll down a little bit further. So we have the first block, pre-employment transition services program. This is an overview of who we are and what the class is going to be about. Selecting an occupation. So this is helping the students think about some of their career interests and helping to identify what's important to them and helping to give them some direction on how their interests might relate to a particular occupation. And then exploring in the third section, what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you're going to need so that we can then create, in those next two blocks, an actual game plan. So what we want our students to leave with when they're part of our pre-employment transition services program is we want them to have an actionable plan that they can think through that relates to an occupation that they're interested in that's tied to the KSAs. So that way that their thought process about their activities, their extracurricular activities, their courses can be closely aligned to the areas of interest and the occupation that they're interested in. Because this is pre-employment, we certainly want to make sure we cover the application process and make sure that students are, what we learned is a lot of students, particularly with online tools, are not quite acclimated to applications. And many of the students that we work with are facing a lot of barriers, and we try to get them involved with the resources that are in their community. So a lot of communities across the country have like summer youth employment programs, but you have to apply by a certain date. And what our research has shown is that a lot of students are not actually participating because they're missing the deadlines, or they're not sure how to apply, or it's a little too complicated for them. So we make sure, and oftentimes, depending on the timing, we try to utilize that summer youth employment program application as the exact application that the students are applying to, so that we can help them get into these resources. And then we also cover the interview process. So what I'd like to do is go into a few of these blocks and show you a few of the content. But I see that there's a question, so I want to cover that first. So is the DARS VRC involved in the game plan making process? We're glad to have everyone involved, and so stakeholders are as active or as passive as they want to be in that process. We really are using that to kind of drive the students in terms of their interests. But certainly as it relates to what are the in-demand occupations in the area and helping to promote that to the students, certainly we would want to collaborate on that, as well as with the parents or the teachers. We find that the more input we can get from the stakeholders that are already working with the students, that already know the students, it's a very valuable input for our process. Thank you for the question. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, we're going to jump into, let's start with the overview, Depian, of the first block here. So what I want to first show you is just kind of the structure of the course. So what you'll see is that there are basically a few sections here. There's a lesson that kind of covers the content. We'll jump into that in a second. We always like to introduce students to our theme song. I won't make you guys suffer through that right now, but we try to make sure that it's kind of, meeting the students where they are in terms of their areas of interest and kind of songs that they like. Every lesson has a quiz that kind of helps us confirm that the students are following along and that they're capturing the information. And the other thing that's really important is that every lesson has a survey, so a satisfaction survey. So we're actually getting from the students themselves, for whoever's teaching them, whoever their instruction is, tell us what you thought about today's class. Give us feedback on, was this valuable for you? And I'm glad to share some of the results from some of the previous classes of how the students have responded to that. But let's go into the lesson. So what the students do, you can basically click to kind of engage into the lesson. And what you'll see on the left is a navigation bar. Well, let me just kind of start at the top first before you go. Yeah, go ahead. You can go. That's fine. Thank you. So here, what the students are able to do first is basically kind of read this. Now, in a remote setting, one of the ways that we would facilitate this is I would ask each of the students that are participating to kind of read one slide or a sentence, so that the students are very actively engaged in the lesson. One of the things about online learning is no one wants to just sit there and just be watching everyone else. But if you know I'm going to call on you and you know your turn is next, that kind of keeps everyone engaged in the discussion. Okay, on the left-hand side, you can see the navigation in terms of the content for this lesson. Our welcome message, we let the class introduce themselves. We tell them who Kinetic Potential Scholar. Kinetic Potential Scholars is when we're working with our high school students. So we kind of call them scholars, interns and scholars. I want to jump to the independent living section, because this is kind of really the scope of what we try to cover when we think about helping students become independent living, with career development being a component of that. So under our career development, as I mentioned, we talked about selecting an occupation, KSAs, interviewing for the job, workplace etiquette, and once you get the job, how do you keep it and how do you advance? And also planning for retirement. But for independent living, scroll down a few. We're also helping the students think about education, health and nutrition, housing and management. Depian, why don't you click on education or health and management? One of those. And so you can see we're talking to the students about learning styles and really trying to educate them about how to move forward and advance themselves. Yeah, click on money management. I always like to quickly showcase this. Establishing a budget, savings and investment, consumption and spending, and financial goal setting. So these are all elements that we think that high school students should be getting that we don't, oftentimes they're not getting in their K-12 education. So we really are trying to be a complement to what's going on in the daytime and making sure that we're kind of being holistic about some of these approaches. Let's go to the next page and go into the career development section.
Right.
So in the career development, we begin by first introducing the students to, the definition of a career, right? We don't take it for granted that this terminology, we know that these are young learners and that they're just being introduced to this for the first time. So we just begin that process starting out, defining what a career is. We start introducing, we owe us pre-employment transition services so they know what this program is about. We talk about the benefits, and then Depine, can you jump down to compensation, pay rates, and salary? And this is when we're beginning to introduce this concept to them as we're explaining our virtual pay rate. All right, so we're going to provide a virtual salary based upon their age and grade, and so that they can earn. And in our program, we structure this so that they can earn an increase each week. So this says that if you're doing your job each week, you should expect to get a pay raise so that incrementally you can move forward. Now, for us, from a tracking perspective, we know what that translates into how much you're actually going to receive in terms of points. And if you are below that, then you're below expectations. If you're above that, then you're a high performer. And that goes into the performance management process. Our partner that we're working with, that we've designed this program for, also incentivized the students to participate with a $75 gift card. And so they were able to access that by successfully hitting the target goal. Okay, so I think that kind of shows a little bit about this section. As you can see, it's kind of the general overview to get started. Depine, why don't we jump into the occupation section? And I'm not going to go through them all. I just want to give a flavor for kind of how some of this stuff looks. We can always customize content with our partners, but I want to make sure that you have a kind of a general overview of kind of how we deliver our programs. Okay, yeah, click on that, please. And what it's asking, we were preparing before we did the demo. So what Depine is clicking on is asking, do you want to start where you left off, or do you want to go back to the beginning? So this could be delivered asynchronously without an instructor, and students could actually engage with this on their own. And let's say mom called them for dinner and they were so excited they were doing this, but they had to leave it. When they came back, the system would remember where they were and would ask them if they wanted to start from the beginning or where they left off. So when we start thinking about working with the students on an occupation, I'll first go with the lesson menu on the left-hand side. We're going to talk about how do you choose a career and getting to know themselves, right? So tell us about what's important to you. And a question I often like to ask the students, and we try to have a good, robust discussion with them, is it more important to make a lot of money, or is it more important to do something that you're really interested in? And so we want to make sure that the students are thinking about both of these parameters and finding the balance what's right for them. And we make sure that they understand is that there's no right or wrong answers to that question. It really is a function of what's important to you. And so this is kind of a lot of what we're doing in this space right here. So instead of using the lesson menu to go through this, I'm going to show you how a student would actually go through kind of self-paced. Let's hit the next button, Depine. And at the bottom, you can see that we're 28% of the lesson is complete when we get to this point. So the students can also see kind of how far they're going along. These lessons are designed to be approximately 1 hour in duration. And that was, again, for this partner, they were delivering this as during the school day. So it had to fit into a program period, and that's how we structured it. Other partners may want to do this, after school. We know that pre-employment transition services is generally meant to be as an out-of-school time activity. But again, I think depending on the population, sometimes it's a little easier for that to be done during the school day for transportation and reasons like that. So you can see that we're asking them about what are the important qualities about independent living, what type of work activities they're interested in. And so then we start going into some surveys and some questionnaires that allow us to produce a report in terms of career interest profile report. And I believe we sent you guys a copy of that, but if not, we can certainly send you a draft of what that career profile report looks like that basically highlights number of occupations and different job zones so that the students can think about the KSAs, the requirements to get into a career. And one of the things that when we're working in this section, we're doing with the students is actually having them go out. Once they identify an occupation, we're having them actually go out and Google a job that they're researching to say, yeah, I would want this job. And that's what we build their career game plans around. Let's go to the next slide. So here, what we're asking the students to do is, from these 14 qualities, tell us which ones are most important to you, right? Is it doing service and to make the world a better place? It's your location. Is it the prestige? You're really getting a sense about what's important to them so that we can actually customize our programming to their interest. And so we find that this is very helpful. And then we talk about it with the students, why they selected that and have a robust debate. And obviously students answer this in very different ways. And so hearing them communicate with each other, we're trying to just facilitate that conversation so that they have a very broad understanding about why other people are selecting that and kind of validating their own thoughts and also expanding how other people are thinking about it, right? Like I may say service because this is why it's important to me. Maybe you never thought about that before. And you're like, well, I think that's great. I think I would like to explore something like that myself. And so that's one of the areas that we typically are thinking about as it relates to this. Okay, I think you can kind of get a sense of this content and kind of how we engage with the students with this. One of the things that I want to show now is I'd like to show one of the quizzes. So after a student would complete this 45, 50-minute lesson, we give them 5 minutes to go through this quiz. So we'll go through this and show you, we'll make sure we get one of the answers incorrect so you can see also the feedback the students get when they give a correct answer versus when they give an incorrect answer. So KP recommends that you explore your personal interests and the qualities that are important to you as the first step in selecting an occupation. Depine, I'll let you decide what the answer should be. All of the following are career development activities except the following. Okay, and there's one other question that's on the next page. Typically, we try to have for an hour, we try to have 3 questions that kind of cover the content that was presented. Okay, and the last question for job zone 1, for a job zone 1 job, you need a bachelor's degree and several years of experience to have the knowledge, skills, and abilities required for occupation in this category. Okay, so now we can finish the attempt. And then we can submit our answers. Now, again, because we're delivering it this way, we always track the results, and we'll show a little bit about some of that in just a minute. So the students get immediate feedback. They can also repeat the lesson. Great job, Depine. Yes, that is correct. When you explore what is important to you and what you value in life, it becomes much easier to assess occupation, how well they meet your needs. The correct answer is true. Next question. And unfortunately, that's not the correct answer. The correct answer was apartment living arrangement. So all the others are part of that process except for selecting an apartment living arrangement. And then the second one also, unfortunately, this is not the correct answer. Job zone Job zone 1 represents entry-level position in the workforce. There are generally very little education or experience required and requirements. So you can see, again, we're giving the students feedback, but it's also giving us feedback if they are comprehending, if they're participating, if they're actively engaged. If they're doing this asynchronously or doing this, remote, we're still able to get that feedback and utilize that, and then either redirect or review some of the information to make sure that everyone is comprehending. Okay, let's go into a third section, which I have here are the interviews. Oh, I'm sorry, Japine, I wanted to show the report that they got for the status report, but I can do that on the back end. Let's go to the interviews. We'll do the satisfaction survey after that. I apologize. So when we go into the interview process, this, I think, was a very, and then if you can make this one a little bigger so people can read it. What happened was we were delivering this as an in-class traditional classroom experience using the technology. So just like you guys are looking today, you were looking at my screen or you were looking at the Pine screen, and we're following along and kind of facilitating this conversation. But when COVID hit, we had to go 100% remote. And it was very easy for us to kind of make that transition. So one of the things that we did first is we had to establish the new rules of engagement, right? So in a traditional classroom, when we're right in front of you, you kind of know, we established that up front, and people are kind of accustomed to that. But as we transitioned to online learning, it was very new. So what are we suggesting for them now that we're practicing? Learning happens best in a quiet place. So we want you to think about where you're going to be working at. We know a lot of people aren't familiar from working from home, so we're going to take some time to cover that. Now class participation is even more important. And so this is, again, where having everyone actively engaged and giving them a role. So even this, these 3 bullet points, we would have a separate student read each point. And so that they're going through and participating, not just listening to me. So I'm calling on the students, please, student number 1, answer number 1, student number 2, number 2, and go on like that. And then we always highlight the audio, as I did before we got started. But most important for us is be respectful, and that, people have different opinions, but we want you to treat your colleagues and your classmates in a very respectful way. And we generally have had good success with that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So preparing for an interview. So one of the things that we want to start with the students. Yeah, go ahead, Define. Did you go to the next slide? So we got to know the students a little bit, and just, we had a little gap when COVID first hit. So we came back and just trying to get them re-engaged. And then let's go to the opportunity and interview definition, and then let's just show the opportunity in marketing. So we begin by making sure that when we are explaining to the students in terms of how we want them to think about going into an interview, is that we want them to really think about where they're going to be an opportunity for them to market themselves. And we realize that these are young people. So, just what it means to have an opportunity. What does it mean to market yourself? So these are things that we're going to drill down on why they're highlighted. So to make sure that they have some examples. So let's go to the next slide and show kind of how we encourage the students to think about this so that they have a very tangible understanding of what it means to market themselves. So when you think of marketing, what commercials or products come to mind? So we really try to, we know that the students are online or watching television. This generation more online and watching television, but they are bombarded with commercials and marketing all the time. So we're trying to help them appreciate, what's effective about that marketing, how they remember it, and what's the purpose of it. And so we're trying to help them make that, that connection. And then bringing that back to how does that relate to how you can market yourself? What can you take away from when you see the Nike commercial, or well, how can you leverage some of the things that really stuck in your mind to help promote yourself and the great things about you? So this is just an example. And again, there's a lot of dialogue happening here, and we're on Teams. We're using Zoom oftentimes in these scenarios. Okay, so we showed the quizzes last time, but this time I want to show our satisfaction survey. The students also in this program also got T-shirts, so we have to make sure we collected their T-shirt size as well for their participation. So after, as I mentioned, every lesson has a survey, and so I want to just quickly walk through how students submit that information to us. They are anonymous, so as you can see right underneath it says mode is anonymous. Can you just highlight that so people can see that, Divine? Okay, so again, these are just some of the instructors that are teaching some of our courses. And let's go to the next page so we can see the questions. The surveys are the same structure after each lesson. So every lesson is asking basically the same questions. How familiar were you with today's topic before the workshop? Next page. How clearly did your instructor explain the course material, right? So it's also a statement about the instructor. You know, do you think they did a good job? Did they engage you correctly? Next page. In terms of your personal career and professional development, how valuable was today's class? Right? So did you get something out of this? Was this a good use of your time? Oh, I appreciate that, Define. I like good grades. Thanks so much. Overall, were you satisfied or dissatisfied with today's lesson, with today's class? So this provides the student also with an opportunity to give us input. And then would you recommend this workshop to other students? And I think the last question may be, what would you recommend that we change? What adjustments would you suggest that we make to the class? Okay, so we certainly want to get feedback from them to make sure that we have an understanding about how they are engaging, and we can make adjustments to make sure that the students that are there, that we are customizing our experience for them. Okay, so that's our student feedback form. Okay, so that's just an example of some of the content. The content for us, we can create content. There's a lot of content available. Some programs we talk about labor laws and the number of hours you can work and what days, if it's in the summertime. So that is something we would certainly like to customize with our partners, right, with you guys to say, what makes the most sense so that we can then have the curriculum really cover the areas that you guys think are in need. I want to just quickly show the attendance tracking. So this is again how the students are earning their points, and also how we know where they're, that they're attending. So in this one, you can see Reggie Foster has come to a class on the 18th as well as the 19th. He was marked present, and the instructor gave him remarks that said, "Great job, a bit responsive." But if you look at the third line, that Reggie was tardy for that class, and because he was tardy, you notice that instead of getting the full points, he only got 80% of the points. That means he's only getting 80% of the his pay rate before that period, right? Because he wasn't there. So we've actually docked his pay. And so that's something that will reduce the amount of points that he would have. I think it sends a message to him immediately that he may not be able to get some of the items out of the store that he might like. B, it sends a message to us as a risk indicator that this is not what we want to see, and that we need to kind of be cognizant of that and begin to keep our eye on it. In today's class, he had an excused absence. So we do reward some points, 30% of the points, for the behavior of notifying us and making sure that you communicate it with, and again, your work and the simulated work environment, so we can make sure that we're reinforcing that that's good behavior. Okay, and so Reggie can see how the instructor is marking them, and it can also see the remarks. The instructor has the ability, a similar kind of functionality, to actually take the attendance and the various statuses associated with that. I'm just going to take just a couple of minutes to quickly walk through some of the tracking and the performance management aspects of this that we look at in progress reporting. And then I'm going to just take any questions that we have and answer any questions that you guys might have. Thank you so much, Defiant. Okay, so you can see this is Reggie Foster's kind of profile page, but now we're really tracking his progress. So looking at his daily progress, as he earning points in the manner that he's supposed to be. We're also looking at one of the things I want to highlight at the top, where underneath where it says career cybersecurity, I want to highlight the opportunity costs. Opportunity costs represent points you could have earned, but you, for some reason, did not. And again, this is what we use as another risk indicator to suggest that we expect all the students to receive all of the points, but when they don't, we want to make sure we're making notes of why, and so that we can either take corrective behavior or have early intervention when we see that there are problems. So these risk indicators and these risk profiles are fairly important to us. Scroll down, Defiant. So now you also see on the left a progress report and the attendance report. And what you can see is that for Reggie Foster, we're tracking both his academic. As I mentioned, we think that the #1 way for someone to get a great job is to do great in school in K through 12. So we want to reward that behavior as well. Now, this is for students who are in our full program. People who are just taking pre-employment transition services may not have kind of the full scope, but I want to share with you just how our system works. So you can see the value. So 625 is his pay rate. So if it's a 1-hour class, that's what he gets. But if it's a little bit more, you may get, if it's an hour and 10 minutes, you get a little bit more, double that, depending on how long the class is. The other thing is, you can notice the red dot on the ELA 900. There are no points there. So that's, again, an indication of how that would contribute to the opportunity cost, because Reggie did not earn those points. On the left-hand side, you see our progress report and the overall progress at the very top. Can you highlight overall progress, meet expectation, Defiant? So at the top here, you'll see just the basic summary. So meets expectations, so things are going well. And a green arrow going upward is showing that not only is everything okay, green for okay, but it's also going in the right direction. Things are actually improving. So if we had a concern and he might be dipping around the yellow, it means that he's trending in the right direction, and that's what we like to see. His academic goals, his social goals, and in this case, he doesn't have any professional goals yet as a 9th grader. That's what we're working on for the pre-employment transition services. Can you go to the very bottom? The last thing I just want to show about this is the learning plan. So we are looking at competencies. So for a student that is, this student's in 9th grade, but Reggie also had some development areas in 8th grade. So all the competencies were not met in 8th grade. So we're continuing to work with him as part of our after school program. Again, this is how we work with K-12. Kind of a collaboration between academic support as well as preparing someone for the workforce. And so even with the competencies, when we get to KSAs, we are tracking them in a very similar way, and then working on activities. So which after school activity can help you build team building? Well, sports are a great way to do that. And so as we kind of put ourselves in the career advisory role, we're also helping to support looking at the resources in the community at the school and how that can basically help support the overall career game plan and the overall goal. Okay, I covered a bunch of stuff, but that's what we wanted to share with you today. Maybe you can stop sharing right now, Defiant. So I'd love to get some feedback. Hopefully I didn't go too quickly, but I'd love to hear any thoughts that anyone has about what they saw today. I could call in a couple of people because I think that's the educator in me, but I'd love to get some volunteers.
And he does that
too. Go ahead, Nora. Nora, what did you think? Maybe I just kind of started off. What was your, I mean, we had a meeting previously and we talked a little bit conceptually. Now seeing kind of the demo, maybe any feedback you have about between the concept and the actual delivery.
I'm still trying to figure out how best to make it work in the schools or individual. And then I know when we were talking in our staff meeting with Christiansburg and Withville, we, like I had mentioned, I had in my notes that you could use it not just for students, but for possibly older individuals as well. So,
yep.
How we can do that with those older clients that we have on caseload. I really like the being able to see how that pay works. I know that you had talked a lot about that. And after each lesson, the surveys, because of having that constant live feedback, I think is important as well. When you were talking like you're using this with K-12, are you meaning like K-12, the online school program?
Well, we often are, well, there are a couple of ways that we come in. So we come in we started off with the Department of Rehabilitative Services in Maryland. So working with students with IEPs and 504 plans. And so it's through the doors relationship in academic setting. And so those students, and working with some alternative schools where those students already have maybe some behavioral issues, there have been some other challenges. And so that was our initial population. But also going back to your point, so, you know, we are also working on the same content with adult learners and folks who are part of the long-term disability community as well. And just, again, taking our time and process to kind of go through it with them. Sometimes we may have to review some of the content more than once to make sure that people are kind of accepting the information. But the content, I think, is good for everyone, right? You know, what we often hear from some of the educators that are listening or supporting some of the students we're working with is, I wish I would have had that when I was in K-12. You know, I wish I would have got that information then. So that's just some of the feedback we're receiving. I would love to hear from some other folks. There's quite a list here of names to call from. So I'll give one more second before I maybe call for someone who maybe wasn't in our last meeting and seeing this for the first time. All right, let me go to the participant list, see if I can find a name that might be a brave individual for me. Ben, can you give me some feedback about your thoughts?
So thanks for calling on me. No, I mean, it sounds like a pretty neat program. I came from the education system as well, so you know, seeing that side of it is kind of neat. Seeing the thought process that went behind it, and I can definitely. Sorry about that. My dogs are barking.
No worries. Everyone's working from home. We get it.
Yeah, but you know, the incentive side of it is definitely going to be a motivator for our high school kids. And you know, the potential of working with students as young as 14, you know, that can help. So
thank you, Ben. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Donna, would you like to add to that and make a comment?
Okay, hello. It was very interesting. I did like the incentive program, like Ben was talking about motivation to participate. Sometimes that's something we struggle with, especially virtually. It was a lot to take in. I'm still trying to process. It was very interesting. Just the topics you cover were relevant, and I would like to know more about it.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We certainly appreciate that. And I don't know if everyone got a copy of some of like the deliverables that we produce in terms of like, because so not only do we kind of conduct these sessions, but we actually will produce a report for the program to say, this is how the students did, and this is what, how they performed, and produce some charts that didn't show how they earned their points. So you can see if they were tracking or if there was a dip or there was a low in their performance.
I don't think they did not. I would have to go back and I know I didn't send anything out. I don't know if Whitney did. So I would have to try to go back and look at a former email from you, or if you want to send me one, I can disperse it out.
Yeah, so what I can do is I could resend those emails. I think may have been 2, and I can resend those to you, Nora, and then you can distribute to the larger distribution, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to call on one last person, and I'll go to the bottom of the list. And so, Maureen.
I had a feeling that was going to be me. I thought that it was good. I also like the incentive piece. I really liked being able to look and kind of see what the program looks like as a whole, as far as the components go. On the presentation, a lot of times we get an idea of what a program is going to look like, and they tell us, but to see it, I think all in front of us, to see what you're going to tackle and what pieces you're going to touch base with the students, I think that I enjoyed that.
Good. Thank you. Is there anyone that thought we were missing something, would like to see some additional content, or everyone felt, and I know we weren't going through this quickly because we only had an hour and we wanted to try to show you guys so much. But did anyone think that there was something that they were expecting to see, didn't see, or they felt like we hit things? Carol, I see your hand.
Hey, first, I'm sorry I sound honky. I have bronchitis. But I was just wondering how you handled in previous situations working with students that had different levels of ability.
Yeah. So we work with both short-term and long-term disability in academic settings, as well as, pre-employment and just occupational development. And so what we try to do is try to create a team atmosphere. And so we are, support integrated everything, integrated employment, integrated teams. And so we go at the pace of the group. But if we find that there's someone who needs some additional time, then we try to make some accommodations to either acclimate that person, either doing some in advance or doing some as follow-up, so that the class can still kind of move at pace, but also that no one gets left behind. We prefer the group settings because what I notice is that when you're delivering something, like sometimes kids feel like it's punitive, but we try to make it social and fun. One of the things I didn't talk about is that they're individual goals. You get to a certain level, right? I mentioned the $75 gift card, but there's also group goals. So when we look at the collective point total, if we get to a certain point, we're going to have a pizza party. So we try to also encourage kind of the peer pressure of the participants to help each other move forward. And again, because most jobs work in a team environment. So we're trying to, with our design, we're trying to reinforce kind of this simulated work environment, from, collaboration to performance management to compensation. All of those things we're trying to incorporate. Maureen.
My question, I think, so you had mentioned that like sometimes you have them read and they go around in a circle so that they're paying attention. I guess my concern would be is that I have some clients that would be a complete no-go. And how do you know that before you tell everybody that they have to read, I guess is my concern.
Yeah, generally when students are being signed up, we asked if there are any accommodations that need to be made for participation. And so we would hope that in that referral process, that we at that point would have those discussions. And so as long as we know, I mean, again, we often get the IEP so we can actually see for ourselves, but when we don't get that information, then we basically are learning on the fly. And as an educator, we're kind of picking up on some of those clues along the way. And so and as you can imagine, there are different levels of abilities just in kind of literacy that we're going through, but we're trying to help those students along and actually even support them in their learning, right? Even in their literacy. And so we try to make sure that the group understands that we succeed together. So where there's these kind of bumps in the road, we want them to, because that's how a real work environment is. Everyone is not at equal level, right? We have different strengths and different challenges. And so we're trying to facilitate that so that people are accustomed to being in an environment where maybe you do have to go a little bit slower for someone else because that's how your team is and that's how the structure of the team. So that's kind of how we try to approach it. Anyone else want to make a comment or any suggestions? And I want to make sure you guys know, Nora was right. I would have normally had you guys play the student role and had you guys reading, but I felt like today we had a lot to cover. So, but again, as you can imagine, with so many of us on the line, if you're just listening, then you may not be as engaged. But if you know I'm going to call on you and ask you a question, then you're typically a bit more engaged. And the students do enjoy that. They enjoy being the lead and giving them an opportunity to, when we come in, okay, let's review what we did last time. Who wants to kind of let everyone know and remind us? So again, engagement, I think I do a lot of online teaching. So when we're in an online environment, that's just a skill in terms of how to keep people engaged and how to get the collaboration. But again, this doesn't have to be delivered in that modality. But if COVID hits or people are spread out very far and you're not able to get to them, or they're in rural areas and you need to co-locate them so that they have access to the technology, then this becomes an important platform to facilitate that. And it also, we use Teams, we use Zoom. I think we're using Zoom mostly for the delivery of these programs. Well, that's become almost ubiquitous in terms of the workforce now. So we want students to make sure that they're having that practice, that they're learning the computer, and that their digital literacy is pretty strong as well. I'll take any last questions. I know we're right at our kind of our time here today. If anyone has any last questions, you're certainly welcome to email me. And I'll make sure that that's generally in my email. Nora will receive. So if you guys have any separate questions, then please let me know. But otherwise, we really appreciated this opportunity to share with you the work that we do and how we do it.
Thanks for offering this for us. I appreciate it.
And then I'll also make sure, Nora, that I send you the link to the video. So when I forward the other information, so that those who were not able to participate in today's demonstration can watch it post hoc.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much. And we look forward to working with you guys soon.